Today, I want to talk about a conversation that is had between Glen Greenwald and Nick Fuentes. And the reason why is because they are talking about who will lead Turning Point USA after Charlie Kirk's assassination. And the thing is about it, I think it's an interesting conversation because they dive into some more nuanced topics like control and influence and all these kind of things. And I just found the conversation very striking. And so I wanted to dive into it a little bit, take a look at that interview between the two of them, and then provide some of my thoughts on the topics that they cover as well.
One of the things that I find such an eye-opening kind of mass-dropping moment is what happened with TikTok. And I saw you mention this too. I've been covering this from the start. I knew this was going to happen. A lot, when the ban on TikTok was first announced, the rationale was we can't have the Chinese controlling the algorithm that shapes the views of young Americans. And that went nowhere in Washington. That was 2020. It didn't get anywhere near the approval it needed in Congress. The Biden administration abandoned it. Nobody cared. It was only after October 7th when Democratic members of Congress became convinced that it was because of TikTok that the young generation was turning against Israel, did they suddenly decide, oh my God, we have to do something about TikTok. And the ADL came out and said, we must ban this or we must capture it. And the ADL even went to Israel, Jonathan Greenblatt, and said, capturing TikTok is at least as important as capturing the land dominated by Hezbollah and Hamas.
And right off the bat, what a thinly veiled joke that whole saga was. Because yeah, they couldn't do anything about it. And that's why I always say, I think China is just a massive distraction. I don't think we're actually afraid of China at all. I think what it is that we just like to basically, or the military industrial complex or the government or whoever's in collusion about it, they just want to build them up as the boogeyman to try and make sure that we're constantly prepared. Because them and Russia, right? It's pick your poison. Who can we vilify and who can we justify? Oh yeah, we need to build up, continue spending on our military because they're coming to get us. That it's literally just them, the people in charge trying to scare us into going along with their agenda. That's how I have felt about China for quite some time now. Yes, there are some legitimate concerns about Taiwan, and that's where all the chips are made, but that is our own fault. Like the fact that we allowed geographically extremely close to China, a small little island that China views as theirs, and they exist because of a rebellion against them. Yeah, we're going to allow all of our chips to be made there. That's a great job, guys. What a great idea. So, yeah, I think that is a concern, but the doom and gloom over China being a threat to us, I think is vastly overblown because I think we have a very symbiotic relationship on both sides. They need us to buy their stuff, and we need them to make it. And so we're at this point in time, we're basically married. So that's why it was always, and this is what made that so glaringly obvious is the whole TikTok ban thing. If China was actually a threat and anyone actually cared, what happened with TikTok or what is happening with it now would have happened then. They literally forced them and said, hey, guess what? You need to do this or it's going away. And they finally gave them an ultimatum. And now the only reason why anyone cares is because Israel is realizing, oh shoot, we have a problem. A big problem. And so, yeah, now that all these anti-Israeli sentiments are cropping up on there because, oh, guess what? We can see that there's a genocide being persecuted here or carried out here. Well, then, guess what? Now we are against it. And that's the interesting thing about this point in time in history is that we can see the actual truth of what is going on in Gaza. And so that makes it really hard for our government to essentially fleece us and say, oh no, but they're trying. That's why now the sale of TikTok to essentially Zionist donors and or essentially to Israel is being allowed, which is laughable because it's still literally just transferring ownership from one foreign government to another. But because the government that's being transferred to has a PR crisis, well, it's fine. That's the one that we want. This is our war-loving little brother who actually treats us like its client state somehow, some way. I don't know how they get away with that. But because that is happening, well, now it's okay. It's just going, yes, it's going to another foreign government essentially, but that's totally fine because those are the people that we back. But it's just, again, so nakedly obvious that no one actually cared until it could be seen as being used for a means to an end for the Israeli government, which is just absolutely disgusting.
And then, of course, a month later, Congress does ban TikTok on those orders. And then suddenly, after 9 months, Trump finds a way to sell it, not just to Trump allies, but to the largest single donor to the IDF, which is Larry Ellison, whose only cause in life is Israel. And so it seems clear to me that you don't need much conspiratorial thinking to see that each one of these issues is ultimately driven by that same topic, despite the effort to say, oh, you're obsessed with Israel. When I see members of Congress going every week to Israel and passing resolutions every week for Israel and giving all American money to Israel and fighting wars for Israel and giving TikTok to Israeli interests, I don't think it's me who's obsessed with Israel. I think it's the people in power. And along those lines, I wanted to...
Certainly the United States government. I mean, just how many times do you say Israel there? Yeah, it's insane, though, the amount of funding that we provide for them. And this is where I wish it was just totally decentralized. Everyone just has an app on their phone and we're allowed to vote. It would overwhelmingly, 90% to 10%, if not more, would probably say no more funding to Israel. Zero. We're done. Quit it. It's not happening. That is what I think needs to happen because, yeah, this is just absolutely disgusting. I think everyone's fed up with it. We provide them just a baseline funding. We send them billions of dollars, and then we fund their military, and then now it is exhausting and so naked and so disgusting.
I ask you about Turning Point, which is obviously a very well-funded and now more powerful than ever organization in American politics, especially among American youth, given the martyrdom of Charlie Kirk and everything else. And it is obviously now a question of like, who's going to run Turning Point? And, you know, if you go back a month ago before Charlie Kirk was killed, you saw a lot of these Israel fanatics like Laura Loomer. I'm not sure if Ben Shapiro said anything, but his crowd, a lot of them were, you know, trying to eject Charlie Kirk from good standing because he had a debate on Israel with Dave Smith, and then he had...
And what I'll say about Ben Shapiro is he did have, I remember because I watched it, that was like one of the first things I watched because I was like, it's interesting with the whole Israel ties. He did have him on, and they actually went through an interview. So whether or not he made a public statement about it, he certainly, I think, was in the loop of, hey, bring me on. I want to try and give pro-Israel talking points. So, yeah, whether he expressly attacked Charlie or not, I think he certainly, there's probably some sort of, I don't know if I want to say pressure, because that might be too strong of a word, but some sort of influence being pressed upon him from Ben Shapiro, in my opinion. I could be totally off base there, but that's how it kind of seemed to me. Like, yeah, they got along, but like, why did he have him on so immediately before his assassination?
Invited Tucker to speak, knowing Tucker was going to bash Israel, and Tucker spent half his speech talking about Epstein as a Mossad agent and how the government is trying to cover that up. And people were infuriated with him and felt like Turning Point was in danger for the agenda for which it was set up, which is to serve Israel. And now you see Ben Shapiro suddenly appearing on the Charlie Kirk show and announcing millions of dollars in donation to Turning Point. As you pointed out, Erika Kirk, despite knowing not much about her, is assuming this leadership role, and the kind of question is, who is she and what are her influences? What do you see as going on now with the attempt to, now that Charlie Kirk isn't running Turning Point to make sure that Turning Point stays in the hands of a very reliable person or group of people who are loyal to the Israel agenda that its funders demand.
And real quick on that, the interesting thing is, and who knows if it actually has anything to do with her, right? She may have, speaking about Erika, she may have evolved her opinions alongside with Charlie. And especially in seeing Charlie's having to deal with essentially these very pro-Israel donors and other, figureheads and that kind of stuff. So it's very likely that she may have also changed her opinion, right, along with Charlie, because Charlie used to be very Zionist as well, or very pro-Israel at the very least. So he used to be, and then he started, and that's why there's all this speculation about what happened with the assassination, is because it seemed like, okay, he was starting to ask questions, and then all the pro-Israel, pro-Zionist people were attacking him. So again, I don't want to, saying that that is the caveat before what I'm about to say, is that I think it has been pretty well established and found out now that Erika's dad worked hand in hand in getting the Iron Dome going, and both her mom and her dad work in intelligence. So I've seen tons of stuff going on around that. So again, that is, I think, pretty well known at this point in time. But yeah, that is a question: is who is she? Where are her beliefs? Because again, I think given her background, she may be in that pro-Israel camp. However, Charlie was as well until recently. So it's entirely possible that she also is, has had a turn in that direction. But I think there are a lot of people within Turning Point, this I believe, that it's probably a power struggle in there right now. And all the people who are super pro-Zionist, pro-Israel, those people are probably trying to claw and get as much power within there and influence as possible to try and re-steer Turning Point in that direction. And it could be for multiple reasons. It could be because they're ideologically captured. That's actually what their beliefs are. Or it could be just because they're greedy and they're trying to save as many donor dollars as possible. So it doesn't even have to be an ideological reason that they're doing this. It could just be, oh yeah, hey, we want to make sure that we're continuing to get millions of dollars from these donors, these pro-Israel donors. So we're gonna steer it back in that direction. Just interesting things to think about.
Well, they're already swarming. Like you said, Bill Ackman came in right away after Charlie died with $1 million as a reward for information about the killer. Sean McGuire from Sequoia came in and said Charlie Kirk's family is set for life. Andrew Kolvet, who is this PR guy at Turning Point, he's sort of been the spokesman. He was the producer on the show. He's got a very interesting background. He comes from this PR company, and he was working with Marissa Straight, who's the Unit 8200 officer that's running Prager University. So clearly,
and that's a very interesting call out, because I hate to say this, because you don't want to call someone out if you don't really know them, but yeah, the Kolvet guy that is the PR guy that's basically kind of stepped up so far. I don't know that he's going to be the long-term solution, but I just get very slimy vibes from him. And I hate to say that, because I think a lot of people have represented him as a friend of Charlie Kirk, like one of his closer friends at Turning Point. But I do not like the vibes I get from him. I've watched a few things with him, and I just get very slimy vibes from him. I feel the same way about like a Sam Altman or people like that, where it's just, you can't quite put your finger on it. But if you were to come out and tell me that he was one of the ones in the power vacuum where he's trying to veer it back because he wants a bunch of money or because he's ideal, I would not be surprised about that. Like that is the thing. And do not get good feelings. And just hearing from Nick here about his ties well, then that kind of makes sense and puts a little bit more justification about my feelings about him. So just, again, I just wanted to call it out, because if anything happens with him where we go, oh yeah, this is the turning point has veered hard back in the pro-Israel direction, and oh, by the way, this guy's at the head of it, I just want a timestamp right here. So that's the main reason why I'm bringing it up. But yeah, not a fan at all of the guy. And again, I don't usually like to call that out, but I think for the case of, I think it's very relevant to essentially the point that's being made here. And oh, by the way, there's additional actual factual reasons to go along with it that are presented.
There is. Everybody recognizes that a power vacuum has just opened up. Charlie Kirk, as we said earlier, is this towering figure. And now that he's gone, there is this huge black hole in the center of Turning Point. And so question one is, who's in charge? Erika Kirk. And, who is she? We don't know. Is she going to be a force in and of herself? And what are her values and what's her alignment? Or will she kind of be somebody who's going to be directed by the board? And then who's going to be the board? Who's going to be the money behind Turning Point? One interesting thing is they talked about this Jewish donor, one of their bigger donors who gave them $2 million, rescinded the donation. And then when Charlie died, sent the donation back in. You wonder, were assurances made? Is there sort of some renewed confidence? Maybe that was out of some sort of sympathy for the organization. But to me, it's a big question mark. But
and the other thing too is that does raise an eyebrow. Like, that's kind of a red flag, because in doing that, in rescinding it and then re-donating, right? That looks like, I mean, to me, any conspiracy theorist I think can get here, right? And you don't even have to be a conspiracy theorist, but you go, oh, because of this guy, they took it away, and now that he's back, they're giving it again. And so by doing that, it just kind of makes you go, huh, was it purely because of him, and they didn't like him, and now that he's gone, you think that you feel confident that Turning Point is going in that direction again? That it's going back in the pro-Israel direction? Why would you think that? Why would you? Was it a promise that if you got rid of him, you can have it back? Like, it just does not look good. I cannot see any real justification for it. I think the most generous interpretation is what Nick is saying there, where you go, oh, we feel bad that he was assassinated, here, have the money back. But people who are donating that amount of money, I cannot give them that charitable of an interpretation. And so, yeah, to me, I just go, no, like, it looks very weird to me.
I think, of course, these forces are going to race in. And I mentioned a moment ago, Josh Hammer talked with Mark Levin the other day on the show about this. And Josh Hammer and Mark Levin have emerged as some of the loudest and most vocal pro-Israel voices, both Jewish, both super Zionist. Josh Hammer was tight with Charlie Kirk. Charlie Kirk told him on a phone call, apparently the week that he died, that if anybody asks about Israel, he's just going to show Josh Hammer's book. And so these are the kinds of people that are going to race in, and I think quite successfully, to try to then gatekeep that conversation.
And that's the interesting thing, too, is that also, by the way, at the Turning Point USA event, that was where they had Hammer debating with Dave Smith. How close were they really? That is a question that I would ask, because the subtext around that is because, so I watch Dave Smith from time to time when he's covering topics that I'm interested in, because I think he's just genuine. He self-identifies as a libertarian, but he's been pretty good on the whole Israel-Gaza genocide going on as a Jew, right? So they can't even really attack him. Well, they try, but it's kind of comical when they do. So the thing is with that, Dave Smith actually pretty easily handled Hammer prior to. They had a previous debate, and Dave Smith was not even going to accept it, because originally he was supposed to debate someone else about, the Israel-Gaza topic, and then they pulled out at the last second, and then Charlie Kirk inserted Hammer into it there, and Dave Smith was like, I've already debated him and won handily. And then Charlie Kirk was like, no, like this is for a bigger audience, and like so it's still relevant, and you should come out and actually participate. So then he ended up doing that. And you can watch it and form whatever opinions you want about it. But the thing that I will say about it is, yeah, for him to essentially knowing, because you have to believe that Charlie knew how that previous debate went. So then how good do you feel about it if this guy, if Hammer is your friend, parading him out against someone who he got destroyed against in a previous debate? So yeah, the validity of their friendship, I think, could be called into question about how close they really were, because he essentially, to me, looks like a sacrificial lamb at this point in time. But just, again, something interesting to call out about the point being made here, with some subtext being explained about it as well, and why I think, it may not be that they're as close as he's trying to claim now.
The question then, I suppose, is what role will Tucker play in the future? He's already lined up to have an event at Indiana, one of those campuses, in the coming months as part of the tour.
Sadly, I don't think it will be a very big one. I think he's doing it because Charlie Kirk was his friend, but I think Tucker is more invested in his podcast and doing what he's doing on there. And I think the problem with that is, in my opinion, if I'm just speaking from a strategical mindset, is that Tucker Carlson is actually very influential and very charismatic, I think. And the thing is with that is I think that could be a very good spiritual successor to Charlie, especially the way that Charlie's views on Israel are going, because they're both very religious, they're both very right-wing. So it makes sense that that is the type of person that you would like to insert there, but I do not believe that Tucker would be interested in picking up that mantle. And that's the thing. I think, especially with that power vacuum in Turning Points USA, I don't think they would offer him the entire gig anyway. But then also, I don't think Tucker would want to take it. I think it's a mismatch on both sides. Although, once again, in my opinion, that would actually be the best route for them, because from everything that I can tell, they were essentially the closest friends to each other. And oh, by the way, again, in spirit, I think they were in the same place with a lot of their arguments. So again, that's just my opinion on it, and that's why he's even doing one of the stops, one of the locations, is because, again, it's his friend, he was close to him. But yeah, I couldn't see him, even though I think it would be probably the best choice, I could not see him actually picking up where Charlie left off for the long term.
But I think that is going to remain a battle, just like it was 3 weeks ago. I think that battle is going to keep being fought. So I think it's a question mark, but the Zionists are definitely going to have an opportunity here to come in and, I think erase any doubt as to the alignment of Turning Point with Israel.
Last question for you. It's kind of ironic that right before we had you on the show, right before you were scheduled, this kind of very, I wouldn't say super pervasive, but not trivial either, accusations started being launched against you that you seem to have become captive to the state of Israel and its interests by virtue of the rejection that you've expressed of the view that Israel was behind Charlie Kirk's killing. Like, oh, look, Nick Fuentes is now running cover for Israel. He's clearly part of the Mossad. And I know that you talked about how frustrating that was. You just don't see the evidence for this conspiracy, and you're saying that. And yet, on the other hand, people are so quick to say, oh, look, Israel must have some role in these machinations. And you talked about almost like a sort of pride that you felt, kind of a happiness in seeing that the discourse has gone so far that if you don't immediately assert Israel is behind something, it creates a lot of suspicion on the part of huge numbers of people.
And just to that specific point, that was one of the things that, because I have listened to Dave Smith talk about this, because he was in the same boat where he's saying, what evidence do we actually have that it was Israel? And he said that he was having a conversation with someone else, and the person said to him, and this is someone who's like really, in the space as a commentator, he said to him, the one most positive thing about everyone jumping on anyone who's not willing to call out that they think it was Israel is that, do you think Israel will ever try and assassinate anyone in the United States now? Because the moment that they do it, everyone's going to blame them. And if there's any way to tie it into them and it gets found out that, oh, hey, Israel was behind the hit, well, guess what? Completely done with them. And so to avoid something like that happening, they will never try and do a political assassination in the United States, ever. And so that is the best thing about everyone coming out and jumping on the "it was Israel" train, is that they can see that the United States citizens are not a fan and think that they are evil enough to do something like that. And so that will keep them in check, hopefully, ideally, from actually doing something like that. So I thought that was kind of funny. But then I'll also say on the Nick Fuentes, like, as someone who made a video that Israel might have done it, I will say it is kind of a stretch, right? And so for him to be responsible, especially because people were trying to tie it to, the shooter might have been a Groyper, which is essentially like a descendant of Nick Fuentes' ideologies, because they might have been the shooter might have been that, which obviously they were not. But for him to distance himself from it, and I think it shows some growth that he's not just, and critical thinking as well, for him to say, okay, what is the actual evidence here, and can I go in that direction? Again, I think there are a lot of things that look suspicious, such as BB posting multiple times, posting immediately in the minutes after Charlie Kirk's assassination about it. Very strange, before even Trump did. And then, oh, by the way, also going on Newsmax or whatever, and then Fox News, and saying, I, of course, didn't kill. That looks a little suspicious. Like, why? I don't claim I didn't kill my grandma. Like, yeah, everyone just knows that. It doesn't need to be said. So it's very suspicious that you're doing that. So I think there are very interesting things that are happening. But, oh, by the way, again, it just shows Nick's reasoning that he has, and that he actually is much more level-headed, I think, than people give him credit for. And that's not a full-blown endorsement for him, but I'm just saying people like to paint him as like an extremist, and because of that, again, he's doing himself favors here, where he's saying, like, yeah, it's not that he's controlled by Israel. It's that he's trying to be calm and level-headed about his analysis of what actually happened. And, oh, by the way, it could just be a donor of Israel that hired a hitman, or it could be, something like that. It doesn't have to specifically be explicitly the Israeli government. It could be someone acting on their behalf, or without even their knowledge, right? I'm not even saying Israel has to have knowledge of it. But again, just things to think about. And again, even as someone who has made a video about it, I still think it's a bit of a stretch to get there.
It clearly is a massive sea change. You see that sea change too in poll after poll after poll, where young people have completely abandoned Israel. And it's clear that, and this happens in every instance where an establishment faction or a power center feels threatened, they start getting increasingly desperate. What do you think is the likelihood, given that this has now all been so unleashed in a way that just seems to build on itself, that Israel and its loyalists, with all their institutional power and all their money and all their willingness to go so far without limits, will be able to stem the tide and reverse the tide and make Americans, especially younger Americans, get on board again with the pro-Israel train?
I think they have recognized that they've lost the public, and I think they recognize they're not going to get the public back the way that it used to be. I think.
Yeah, and that's my viewpoint. Is I don't think they're going to at all. I think it's going to be very hard to get people even moderately back on. But I think with being able to see what is going on in Gaza, like the cat is already out of the bag, and then oh by the way, now you're trying to silence us. Now you've bought up TikTok. You're going to silence free speech on there. So, hey, guess what? There's other platforms that people can go and express their displeasure about this. There's other, like, yes, you may have silenced the most popular one with the youth, but that, I mean, we've already seen, and oh, by the way, that you've already started to see it just in a couple days, where people are getting silenced on there, and then they're coming to popular shows on YouTube and they're talking about it because it's a hot topic of discussion. So what they're doing is they're essentially being called out for that censorship that's already occurring on the platform. So like the anti-Israel sentiments are literally going to be through the roof. Like they think that they're stopping it by taking these actions, but they're absolutely not. And it's just going to run rampant from here on out. And the more you try and clamp down on it, the worse it's going to get.
They recognize, especially on the right wing, that nobody's going to go back to cheerleading the way that they used to be, at least for the most part. So I think their strategy is something like complacency and indifference. And I've noticed that on the right wing, what you see, for example, with somebody like Matt Walsh. In his interview with Tucker Carlson, he says, well, listen, I'm an American, so I don't really care that much about Palestine and Israel. Don't talk to me about that. I don't know anything about that. I only care about America. And to me, that is such like a deliberate, they're trying to come across as indifferent to Israel. They're trying to come.
See, I break with his take on that point of view, because the thing that I think they're trying to do is walk a very fine line. And the only way that they can do that is to not talk about it. And so that is the thing, is that, like, I mean, just think about Daily Wire, right? Like, Ben Shapiro is, I think, undoubtedly the biggest voice there. Like, you don't, and he's, like, the most pro-Zionist person in the United States. Like, you can't, that's the thing, is you can't go against him. And so he has no room. Like, he may not agree with him at all, but he has no room to voice any dissent. So I think it's just the way that he has found that he can, kind of skate talking about that topic at all. But I think there is a subset, and I'm among them, where you just say, we can't solve anything over there, so we need to just remove ourselves completely. So I think there is a route that you take, because he tries to frame it as, he's framing it as, oh, they don't want to talk about it. But I think you can still say the same things that they're saying and mean something completely different. Like, you can mean, oh no, we need to remove ourselves. We need to stop providing any sort of funding over there. Like, we need to just get out and non-interventionalist, especially towards the Middle East. That, again, those are two completely different things. And so just because someone is espousing the same ideals of Matt Walsh of, like, I don't want to talk about it and that kind of stuff, it doesn't mean that they're just trying to avoid it. It could also be, oh yeah, we need to just remove ourselves completely from the situation.
Come across, people say this line on Twitter. They say, just let them kill each other. Who cares? Just let Israel and Palestine kill each other.
And that's specifically the line, is, yeah, if they're using the just let them kill each other, that's where I am. But again, as the the post conversation of that is, we don't involve ourselves in it at all. We're not sending anything to Israel. We're not sending them any sort of aid, period, full stop. We're done. We remove ourselves from the Middle East. The only thing that we do is trade in the region, and that's it.
And by all appearances, that looks like sort of a happy medium, where you're not super pro-Israel, you're not a psycho anti-Israel, you're just really focused on America. But that belies the truth that, of course, the institutions there's a major war being waged. Bari Weiss is going to be running CBS. Harvard now has a Jewish president. Like the war, they're in it to win it. They're taking hits, but they're still pushing and they're still moving up the battlefield here. And
that's a very good point as well that he makes. And that's the kind of the counter argument. And then my argument against that is, yeah, then you need to just, anyone who shows any sort of ideological capture at all to anyone else, they're out. You're immediately out. The second that you start voicing pro any country other than America, any sort of pro sentiments for Israel, for, I don't care, Canada, Mexico, like countries that I generally have, look favorably upon or have no beef with, do not care about, don't really think about. Any country. If you start basically espousing pro that country beliefs, you're out. You're completely out. You can hold no position of power. You can be a regular citizen and shout out all the beliefs that you want, but as soon as you start saying anything that is negative for Americans and positive for another country, well, then you're no longer allowed. That's why we don't allow a foreign-born president, because then they act exactly like Donald Trump and Joe Biden have been acting, where we just, hey, Israel, here's your blank check. That's the entire reason why that rule was put into effect, because you have to have America's best interests at heart. And quite honestly, you just get everyone out. Get everyone out of any institution, because it's not good for America. So yeah, I think you can still have that line, right? His argument is a really good one. So yeah, my line is, let them all kill each other. They can all fight each other till the end of time, for all I care. But oh, by the way, we have nothing to do with that. And if you're trying to argue that we should have something to do with that, get out.
When people say things like, well, we just need to ignore that, they're basically telling Americans to recuse themselves from that conversation and saying we're only going to let the pro-Israel side fight these battles and advocate for their cause. And Americans are just going to kind of say, that doesn't matter. During the Iran war, Charlie Kirk himself said, everybody just turn your phones off. The world is so crazy. Everybody just pretend this isn't happening. I saw other people say, realistically, I think Oran McIntyre in his show with Tucker said, we really need to just focus on parochial concerns like the school board and things that actually affect our real lives. We don't need to concern ourselves with politics. And so if you're
yeah, forget that. It's just driving inflation rampantly up. Yeah, that's not affecting us at all. Just focus on the school board. Okay. What a joke. What a joke.
You're really being perceptive about this. The message, they know they've lost the left. Although maybe they're trying to recapture people like Bari Weiss. But on the right, their message that they're pushing is this very calculated indifferentist position to just sort of say, let Israel handle everything. Let the Jewish Silicon Valley types, let them be the technocrats. They can supply the drones and the satellites and the AI and all this. You just don't concern yourselves with that. You concern yourselves with this parochial stuff and culture war issues. And that's where it's our job to agitate and say, this matters to you. You have a say in how your government operates. This is the American empire. We're citizens of it. We should wield it and control it. We should take an interest in it.
And I think very importantly, that goes along with what he's saying, is that's that classic framing of like right versus left. They are constantly pitting right and left against each other. So then they do whatever they want. They're continuing to ship money to Israel. So like, hey, you guys fight about trans bathrooms and we'll continue shipping hundreds of billions of dollars into the war machine, passing $1 trillion budget. You're never going to come for the real enemy of you, which is us. You're going to be too busy fighting each other. And so that's exactly it, is as he's framing it here.
To me, that's sort of the next phase. That's going to be the toughest battle. It's not people saying you need to be a cheerleader for Israel. It's people telling you, who cares about Israel? You're the crazy one. like you talked about that gaslighting, saying we're obsessed with Israel. We need to push back and say, no, it is our concern. It's our empire. It's our country. And actually, it does matter for our daily lives. That, to me, that's the next step in the battle.
Yeah, and it's so deceitful, that kind of like pseudo abdication, because the reality is it isn't just, money being sent for foreign wars. It's that every one of our institutions is undergoing massive radical limitations on the ability of people to express themselves freely, including at our universities that have nothing to do with protests, but what can be taught. All these hate speech codes that conservatives claim to be so opposed to and infuriated by are being expanded radically in order to protect not just Jewish people, but Israel from a wide range of critiques. So this idea of people on the right saying, I'm not on board with Israel either, I just don't care, is so deceitful, because it obscures the fact that our politics are being radically changed underneath our noses.
And the thing I will say about that is and why I'm able to hold that of like, I don't care what goes on over there, and still because I view those as two separate issues. Like the ideological capture about Israel, like me saying I don't care what Israel does in their neighborhood, but oh, by the way, we shouldn't be funding it. So I care because we're funding it. But if we remove all of our funding and they all want to, kill each other, whatever, I at that point, I don't care. You do whatever you can get away with your own military and your own funding and all that. You don't get any free rides from the U.S. anymore. But the ideological capture of institutions I view as a completely separate issue. And that's why I can, hold these two opinions at once of I don't care what they do militarily and in their neighborhood. We need to be removed from it. But we absolutely, anyone who shows any fealty towards any other nation should be evicted. Send them to Israel. If they care more about Israel than the U.S., send them to Israel. Good luck. Good luck over there. That's what I think. And so that's why, I think it is possible to hold those two views simultaneously. But I get where they're coming from. So
by this Israel lobby and by its loyalists in the United States that the Matt Walshes of the world are encouraging to ignore, because he wants to just somehow find this sweet middle ground where he's neither an Israel shill nor somebody who's going against Ben Shapiro and the interests that fund him. And I do think it's vital to make manifest how deceitful and false that is.
Anyway, that was essentially what I wanted to cover in this video. I thought, once again, some very interesting points that were brought up throughout, and I really enjoy the conversation that they had, and so I wanted to share it and then again provide some of my thoughts on it, because the what they are saying there, right, especially towards the end about having the two different viewpoints, like if you say that you don't care about what's going on over there, well then you're turning a blind eye to what's happening here. I just wanted to provide kind of a differing viewpoint on that. Again, I do think they are making a very good point there, but again, I think there's room for additional thoughts and feelings about that topic and the ability to separate those two things out. But anyway, if you enjoy the video, give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more content like this from me, drop me a subscription down below. It really does help my channel grow. And if you have made it this far, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.